Hi there, welcome to Grow Big Red. We are from the University of Nebraska. I'm Jonathan Larson, an entomologist.
And I'm John Fesh, a horticulturist, and today we're going to be talking about two separate issues that are pretty important for the viewers.
I'm going to be talking about insects and where they go in the winter. Everybody's always asking questions about how do bugs survive these cold temperatures. It's an important question. Insects are poikiliotherms, which is sort of a fancy way of saying that they're cold-blooded organisms. They're the same temperature as their surroundings.
Could you say that one more time, please?
Poikiliotherms. I like saying it. It kind of rolls off the tongue. You want to give it a shot?
No.
No? So with these critters, they're the same temperature as their surroundings, basically. If it's 50 degrees outside, their body is 50 degrees. If it's 10 degrees, they're 10 degrees. So they are not winter organisms. They don't like to be exposed to cold. I know that you feel very similarly. John, you try to get away as much as you can,
Not
right?
quite as bad, but I certainly commiserate with them on that level.
I got Scandinavian blood, so I like it cold. I like it when it gets down into these cold temperatures.
Okay.
But these critters that we see sort of laid out here in front of us, most of them do not enjoy this kind of weather. So winter can be challenging for an insect. What are they going to do in order to not freeze or to avoid freezing? They have two sort of main ways of doing that. Some insects simply do die. A lot of our pests, they will survive in some way, but a few select ones, things like potato leafhopper or European corn earworm, these kinds of organisms, at the end of the summer, whatever's around is usually killed by the winter cold. And then after that, if we are going to get them again next year, they have to ride up on the trade winds or get brought up here in some other fashion. So that's how those populations get restarted. But for the most part, they die right now. There's not too many of those around. There are some insects that like to avoid the cold, though. They get far away from it, just like you do when you get on an airplane.
That's right.
A very famous example of that would be the monarch butterfly. Monarchs are famous for this migratory pattern that they have throughout the North American continent. In the spring, monarchs will travel up from Mexico into the southern United States. In the middle of the summer, they usually start making their way through here. In the fall, they end up towards Canada, and then they trek back. There's one generation that flies all the way down to Mexico. There's a grove of trees down there that they overwinter in, and then they will mate and start the whole thing over again the next spring. It's kind of an amazing process. It's beautiful to watch. I don't know if you've ever seen the monarchs coming through.
No, but it sounds like an incredible frequent flyer program.
It is, yeah.
Long distance.
Lots of miles, lots of orange and black to watch. It's a very interesting thing to see.
It's impressive.
Yeah, and it's something that makes them very famous. It's one of the reasons that people like to think of them as sort of our national insect, I would say. Other insects can migrate too. The painted lady butterfly, we had an outbreak of those a couple summers ago. They will migrate through a series of states. We've also got dragonflies, which not a lot of people think is a migratory insect, but the ones that we see sort of splayed out here, many of them will fly thousands of miles to get away from cold weather in order to go and generate new generations elsewhere before migrating back and becoming part of our summer landscape. And so lots of insects will do that. They just fly away from where the cold is and go where the warm is. They're snowbirds. Others will avoid these cold temperatures in a little more subtler fashion. They are either going to be an egg or a pupa, maybe a larva, or an adult. Any of these life stages they can do this with. And it's going to be different for each species, which one it is, but they use this as a way of avoiding the cold. They dig down into something, or they're coated in something so that that cold temperature can't get to the actual living organism. So one example that I have here that's an egg is this mantid egg case. We call this an ootheca. Oothecas look kind of like styrofoam insulation when you spray that around your window.
Sure.
Kind of looks similar.
Yeah.
Inside of here are a couple hundred, maybe 300 eggs of baby mantids, and those are going to hatch out in the spring, and they're going to eat each other for a little while before becoming adults.
Survival of the fittest.
Survival of the fittest. Insects are tough, you know, they got to do that kind of stuff.
Yeah.
And they are in here insulated in this nice foam material from the cold. It's also good to be an egg in the winter because you don't have to move, you don't have to eat, you don't have to do a whole lot of anything. Everything is well stocked and well taken care of. So a lot of insects are going to be these eggs over the winter. Some of them are larvae. A good example of a larva that overwinters is a Japanese beetle grub. They will bore down into the dirt, into the soil. I know you don't like the word dirt. They will go further down into the soil to get away from that frost line. They can go up to 10, 12 inches deep in order to avoid that cold. That way they never get frozen. Some others that do this would be emerald ash borer. They spend the winter as a larva underneath that bark. The bark helps to protect them from those cold temperatures as well. Some of them will do it as a pupa. In this container here, this is a tomato hornworm moth, those big green caterpillars that you get on your tomato plants in the summer.
Right.
This is what they pupate into. So this is the in-between stage between the caterpillar and the adult. This pupa doesn't move a whole lot. If I kind of hold it up like this, it might, see how it kind of squirms around?
Just a little.
Just a little bit. That's its only defense mechanism, is kind of wiggles its butt at you so you might not want to eat it.
What's this appendage on the top?
Right here,
Yeah.
that's the mouth.
Okay.
So a moth or a butterfly has that proboscis that they feed with.
Right.
This is its proboscis forming. A pupa is very interesting. All the goo that is the insect is on the inside, and this shell will open up, and underneath is the moth or the butterfly, depending on what species you're talking
So
about.
this will turn into a butterfly
This
in about
will,
2
this will
months
be
or so?
a big hawk moth.
Okay.
It's a nice looking moth. They're very wide. When their wings are angled out, they've got some nice spots down the side. The pupa is also interesting. If you take a close look, you can see the antenna, an impression of them along the edge, and the eyes up here on the top.
Right. Just barely see it.
It's a very faint outline of these things. And the little dots down the side, that's how it breathes. Those are called spiracles.
Okay.
So this is down in the soil. Here in my container, it was in this wood shaving material. I've got a little hornworm farm. I've raised about 100 of these in my office, as you've seen. Yeah. So this is just one of the several dozen pupa that I have. But this pupal form is nice to be in over the winter because, again, you don't have to feed, you don't have to move. These are buried in the soil, again, to avoid those cold temperatures. So it's a nice overwintering strategy. Some of them make the cocoon over them, a hair and silk mixture. That helps to insulate them from the cold. So lots of pupa are hiding out in the winter, and those will hatch out in the spring to adults, which will start the whole thing over next year. One of the reasons that we never seem to run out of bugs. Some of them actually overwinter as adults, though, and I've got a few examples of this. The adults are typically these insects that we call hemipterans, or true bugs. They have that needle-like mouth part on the front. They have interesting wings, usually half membranous, half leathery. These insects spend their summer developing and mating and getting together. And then in the fall, there's a lot of adults. And these adults are going to look for areas to overwinter. They often use logs or rocks or turfy areas. They'll get down into those and hide out. But some of them are using our homes. They see the house as this big, healthy tree that's got internal heating, right? And then you can get inside and hide out for the winter and not have to worry about anything.
Maybe this time of year in a garage?
A garage would be good, a shed. They love attics and soffits. They'll get into the wall space, actually. They'll get down into there. They just get into windowsills, anywhere that there's a nice tight space in order for them to just kind of hang out. These ones are called conifer seed bugs, and they have these like big calves on the back. And if you have a lot of pines or other conifer type trees on your property, you may end up with some of these feeding on those trees, on the pine cones and needles. And then in the fall, they're going to start trickling inside, and you'll see them accumulate in lights or underneath lamps or even near heating ducts.
Well, with that in mind, is there any need to do any sort of elaborate control measures, spray insecticides, anything like that?
It's tough to do insecticides for these particular insects because they're not feeding, they're not always crawling in the same areas that we spray the insecticides to keep insects out. So a perimeter spray around the foundation of the home and around windows is going to help, but timing is key. If you do it in the beginning of August, probably not going to help you very much. If you wait until the leaves really start falling off, that's the time where you might get some control. Those residues only last 1 to 3 weeks on the house, so it's got to be there for these to crawl through as they try to get inside. Once they're inside, it's not a good idea to spray for them. It's best to just vacuum them up or use a broom, throw them outside, let them freeze to death. You can curse at them from inside where it's warm.
So here in late January, that would be the time, would be just to do some vacuuming and some brushing into a dustpan and not be too worried about actually doing any real aggressive control.
Absolutely.
Okay.
Yep. Soapy water, that'll kill some of them if you find them in big groups.
Okay. Suck them up with the hose attachment on the vacuum.
It can be fun to watch them ping around in there.
Okay. Well, very good. What else you got to show us?
Well, we've got some other insects hidden over here. These are some brown marmorated stink bugs. There are other ones that they will overwinter indoors. They are an invasive species. Another famous example would be a multicolored Asian lady beetle. They also overwinter inside and are an invasive. These ones are interesting because during the summer they're a pest of tomatoes and peppers and corn. lots of other crops that we grow, berries in particular and apples. But in the winter, they want an overwintering spot. So they get inside. They are a little different than some of our native stink bugs. They have this kind of gray belly. And if you look at their antenna, this one is missing his antenna, but they have white stripes on them. And they're called marmorated because they're covered in these little brown dots all over their body. These ones, when they get inside, they can smell. They're not going to eat or mate once they're inside, but they do create this musky odor, and it can be annoying to some people. And if you see big pockets of them, again, spray them with soapy water or vacuum them up.
We do see those as pests in the vegetable garden in the summertime, though, and usually it's on, like you said, the berries or the tomatoes. Or
Do you want to smell them?
yeah, I'll give it a,
Yeah.
I'll give it a hit.
It is quite malodorous.
Yeah, and it's not awful, but it's a little bit musky.
It's
yeah.
musky,
Yeah,
right?
yeah.
That's what we associate with a lot of these. These conifer seed bugs are quite musky. The multicolored Asian lady beetle also has kind of a musky odor, and sometimes people develop allergies to those. So that's one reason that you'd want to get them out of the house.
Okay.
After that, we've got some insects that will not just avoid the freeze, they can actually survive it. Some of them produce their own antifreeze inside their body, ethylene glycol-like compounds that stop ice crystals from forming. Very handy thing to have if you can't survive the cold.
Sure.
Other insects can direct ice formation within their body. They can actually control it and form it in areas of fatty tissue. That way it doesn't damage any important organs. It's in these non-essential areas. And as those ice crystals grow, it doesn't destroy anything in the body. And then when they thaw out, they just start crawling around and they're happy as a clam. So there's a lot of amazing things that insects can do, and this is one of them. I think it's really neat that they essentially make things that we put in our car and they can make it in their own body to help themselves survive. And it's just one of the wonders of entomology, one of those things that we really like to see them do.
All right. Well, pretty thorough explanation and summarization. And like you said, insects have been around at least as long as we have. Or
for
much
sure.
longer
Yeah,
even.
long time.
So we're never going to do away with them. I think the best idea is just to manage them properly and to do it in kind of a common sense way.
Yep.
And that's what one of the things you do on a daily basis is try to help us and do research at the university and then transfer that information out to the citizenry of the states of Nebraska, Iowa, around the Midwest.
Absolutely. Exclude them, spray them with water when you can, and you won't have anything to worry about.
Well, vacuuming is another.
Vacuuming
I like
is-
the vacuuming.
vacuuming
idea.
is a big
You can
deal.
Suck them up with a vacuum. All right. Well, that's going to wrap it up for segment number 1 on what insects do in the wintertime. They can be pretty intelligent as far as how they can adapt and escape the cold. We'll shift gears here a little bit and talk a little bit about other winter activities in the landscape. We'll be talking a little bit about dealing with all that ice that we have out there that Mother Nature supplies.